Welcome to our segment where we talk about the Bible and science. Please remember that science points us to God because God is the creator of all universe and we see His fingerprints throughout His creation. Now, evolutionists and atheists will argue that what they call defense attack structures prove that creation does not make sense because a loving God would not create these systems. Now, what is a defense attack structure? Now, this is what atheists and evolutionists will say, and a defense attack structure is anything that would cause pain, like claws, thorns on a rose bush, anything that would be destructive, sharp teeth. And so the question is, why would a loving God create something that would harm other people? And so this is one of their things, that's their argument. How could a loving God be the author of death and bloodshed if everything God created was good? And so therefore, again, anything that's in creation that can inflict pain and death seems to deny to them a good and loving creator. So how do we, as Christians, explain claws and like poison toxins that would be on dart frogs that you know about that comes from South America? Well, evolutionists and atheists claim that we Christians believe that that's the way these defense attack systems have always been there, and we don't believe that, all right? That's not what we believe. When God created the world, He said it was good. 6 times in Genesis 1, we read that God said it was good after He made something, and then on the 7th time, He used that word good. He said it was very good in Genesis 1:31. All right, so obviously creation was perfect. So we would say that in creation, in the beginning, was perfect because God wouldn't make anything less than idea. Even Deuteronomy 32:4 refers to His perfect design. Now, I'm going to have a bunch of verses, but just sake of time, I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to reference certain points in them. And so all the verses are in the app, the Crosswaves app, if you want to read them all. But Deuteronomy 32:4 says that God's deeds or actions are perfect. And so anything that God would do would have a result that would be perfect. So how do we Christians explain defense attack structures that inflict pain? Well, first, God's original world would have been a world where pain would not have been imposed on anyone. Sin caused the world to change. We typically call this the fall of man, when Adam and Eve sinned and disobeyed God by eating fruit from the forbidden tree. So, as I talk about these following verses, I want you to notice the changes that happened to creation after the fall, all right? Like in Genesis 3:14, it says, now the serpent now crawls on his belly. So it would seem that the serpent wasn't on his belly, but after he was cursed, he was then put on his belly. We go to Genesis 3:16, we see that women now feel pain in childbirth. And they also have a desire to be in charge in the home. And so in Genesis 3:16, it says, I will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in the pain you will give birth. And then we see also it says, and you will desire to control your husband. All right? And so we see, again, a change that happened. Before the fall, there wasn't any children yet, but there wouldn't have been any pain in childbirth. I don't know how that would have happened, but God said pain came after the fall. In Genesis 3:17-18, we see that God disciplines man by having him to work hard just to scratch out a living. We also see in these 2 verses that God allows thorns and thistles to grow. And so when you get down to verses 17 and 18, it talks about you will struggle to make a living, and then he will grow thorns. And so we see that there were no thorns on the bushes and things in the garden until after the fall. All right? So again, these things were not there. So what I find interesting is that at first men and animals were vegetarian. We find that in Genesis 1, 29 and 30. And in verse 29 it says, "Then God said, Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food, and I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals." So even the animals would have been vegetarian in the beginning. It's not till after Noah comes out of the ark and after the flood does God allow humanity to eat animals. And we see that in Genesis 9, verses 2 and 3. And so then in verse 3, it talks about how he gives the animals for food, just like he did for grain and stuff. So you see, again, things are changing because of the fall. So I want you to see that God is what God is doing through redemption. That is only going to be finally accomplished when the Lord returns. The prophet Isaiah prophesies that in the future, in Isaiah 65:25, that animals will return to the Garden of Eden days, except for snakes. It talks about how the lion and the lamb will lay down together. We also see in heaven, the book of Revelation tells us that in Revelation 21:4, that he's going to wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. And so what we see is that through Jesus, and then getting back to the second coming of the Lord, heaven is basically a return to the Garden of Eden days. All right? So where wild animals will be able to coexist. They're not going to be killing each other. And so we won't have any pain. We can pick a rose and not get pricked by a thorn. And so these are the things that are going to happen. So back to the question of when did a loving God create these defense attack structures, these things that hurt people? Well, there's actually three possible explanations to when these things happen. First, the defense attack structures could have always been there. Animals could have always had sharp teeth. For instance, the panda bear has extremely sharp teeth, but panda bears don't eat other animals, they eat bamboo. So theoretically, some of these animals could have had sharp teeth. They could have had sharp claws to grab fruit and to reach for things, and then after the fall, they turn around and they use those things on other animals. So they could have always had them. And so that's the reason I mentioned the panda bear to this day has sharp teeth but doesn't eat other animals, okay? A second idea or perspective is that these defense attack structures came about because of the fall. It was not in God's original design, but alterations to creation happened because of man's sin. The second perspective might explain some things like the special glands on the toxins of the dart frogs, for instance. There's an idea possibly that God in his foreknowledge knew that man was going to sin, and so in the genetic structure of the animals there were these things already there, and then after the fall God allowed those things to come out. And so those are two different options, and then the third option would maybe be a combination of both of those. And so we see the opportunity that God would redesign some of the animals and plants after the fall, or some of them had these defense attack structures already there, like claws and sharp teeth, but didn't use them to inflict pain on other animals or people until after the fall. All right? So those are just the ideas of where they came from. The Bible doesn't specifically tell us one way or another how defense attack structures came to be. We just know that there was no pain to be inflicted in the garden. And so we just see that every humans and animals were all vegetarians in the beginning. And so here's the main point. A loving and perfect God made the world as we see it today, ignores the Bible teachings about the curse results of the fall of man. A proper understanding that there are defense attack structures today reminds us that this world is sin cursed. It's a sad place, and we all require a Savior. And so I hope you've enjoyed this week's segment of Bible and Science, and please remember that we Christians are never afraid of science. On the contrary, we embrace natural science because God is our Creator, and there are no surprises to Him.
Bible and Science. The Bible